Tonight are the Iowa caucuses, which of course means, like Elf on a Shelf, Steve Kornacki will be released into the wild to circle around his election night big board. Most of you know me for my royal adjacent content, but I also have an interest in politics, and I am someone who has worked on several campaign cycles from the House of Representatives to state house candidates, all the way to local school boards. Let's get into some history of the Iowa caucuses, why they matter, and what is different this year. For my non-American friends, and honestly, my American friends, because geography, traditionally not our strong suit. This is where Iowa is located. If you need this in royal speak, up here in New England, in Massachusetts, specifically Boston, is where William and Kate had the Earthshot Prize. Down here in New York City is where Prince Andrew palled around with Jeffrey Epstein. And Montecito, California is where Harry and Meghan live. Iowa has maintained the first state to hold their primary vote since 1972. CBS News Minnesota has a great article explaining why post-1968, the Democratic National Convention, which was a mess, changed the rules, which led Iowa to holding their primaries even earlier in the calendar year. Republicans followed suit 4 years later, and yes, they can hold different primaries on different days in different states because U.S. politics are fun. If you're wondering why you tend to see presidential hopefuls manning the famous pork chop grill station and eating variety of deep fried delicacies at the Iowa State Fair, this is why. But tonight is going to be different because while we will get the Republican vote probably later tonight, we will not know who won the Democratic primary in Iowa until March 5th, which is also Super Tuesday. Another big change is while the Republicans hold a secret vote, Democrats actually caucus. This year, Democrats are encouraging people to use mail-in voting. That might be on account of the projected forecast today, but Iowans are a hardy bunch, so they're used to cold. It probably has a lot to do with the absolute shizstorm that happened at the 2020 caucuses. In case you forgot, 2022 was pretty crucial when it came to the presidential election. So in an attempt to marry both the traditions and neighborly feel of the Iowa primaries while also streamlining it for people to make it more accessible, things went off the deep end and there was mismanagement, miscommunication, and a whole lot of finger pointing. Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders requested a recount, and when there was a recanvass, they both tied. And the fight was over one single delegate. And in the event of a brokered convention, that single delegate could be very important. They went international. Both the Democrats and the Republicans hold a national convention, typically over the summer of an election year, to officially announce their candidate. Essentially, you need a certain number of delegates. It's different between the two parties in order to secure the nomination. Even within all of that, there are pledged, unpledged, bound or unbound delegates at the national convention. Like most things in American politics, it is needlessly complicated, but this PBS NewsHour article does a fantastic job breaking it down. So while the Republicans will use Iowa as their first state for a primary, Democrats are going to prioritize South Carolina. Now, that is a good thing and makes sense for several reasons. The biggest one being Iowa, and the state that traditionally follows in the primary season is New Hampshire, are very, very hot states. South Carolina is more diverse. It's almost 26% Black, and that is more indicative of the Democratic coalition. There's another reason Joe Biden would want South Carolina to go first, and that is because that is when in 2020 he really started to pick up steam and the party started to coalesce behind him as the candidate. Things did not look good after Iowa and New Hampshire for Joe Biden in 2020. While New Hampshire historically has had a better track record of ultimately picking the GOP nominee, there are two Iowa winners that, according to Steve Kornacki, ended up with the nomination. Similar to the massive lead that Donald Trump has in the national polling as it stands right now, in 1996 and 2000, Dole and Bush, respectively, also garnered massive leads going into Iowa. Performing well in Iowa this year is going to be particularly important for Republicans. First of all, it sets the tone for this primary race and kind of shows where things are shaking out, at least in Iowa, and that helps with fundraising. And since our campaign finance laws are broken in this country, money's important. One last interesting little wrench into the Iowa caucuses is the fact that you can register as a Republican, even if you were previously registered as a Democrat, and participate in the caucuses, later switching your registration. It'll be interesting to see how many Democrats decide to do that, since the 2024 Democratic race is not wildly competitive, while the Republican one is very important. We will learn later tonight what the big board and Steve Kornacki bring to us about the Iowa primaries.